From a flightless simulator at Ferris Air to a momentous meeting in an alley to the complex mind of an architect to every far sector in space and to the brilliance of the central power battery on Oa. This is the podcast that covers the adventures of all of your favorite ring slingers. This is the Emerald Echo with your hosts, Adam and the Emerald Enthusiast.
Welcome to a megasode, because it could work as two episodes in one. It is both an episode of the DC Comics Chronicles and Emerald Echo, a Green Lantern podcast vidcast. I'm your host, Adam, on both occasions, because we ain't changing mid-show. And my co-host, as always, is the Emerald Enthusiast, Donnie. Donnie, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, comic book fans? It's the man whose ring runs on fanboy energy. It's the Emerald Enthusiast, and the Justice League may be gone, but we're here to bring you all kinds of comic book goodness.
Donnie, before we get going, I know that you went to a Comic-Con, the first one since the pandemic era.
Yes.
And I do want to get some feedback on that,
sure,
amongst our other news. But unfortunately, sometimes we have sad news to pass along. And today, unfortunately, there's a double dose of that. And we've lost two titans in the comic book world, Neal Adams, and as of this recording today, George Perez. It sucks. There's unfortunately nothing any of us can do in this kind of situation. That is the nature of life, unfortunately. The only thing that I guess provides comfort, at least from a fan's perspective, because God knows what the families of these two gentlemen are experiencing. But from a fan perspective, the takeaway, the positive takeaway we can speak about here is that both gentlemen have provided work that will resonate and last many lifetimes. So they will always live on in the hearts and the memories of comic book fans everywhere. But the comic book world is a lot less bright today and for quite some time, because these two titans of the industry are no longer with us. Donnie, a few words, maybe.
Well, I had a lot to say about Neal Adams on my YouTube page, my YouTube account. I won't rehash everything there, but if you know who Neal Adams is, if you know anything about him, you know what he meant to the Green Lantern fandom. He was not somebody to shy away from speaking his mind, and he not only transformed the comic book industry on the page, he helped do so behind the scenes. He was a big advocate for creators, and people today are still reaping the benefits of his courage. Much the same can be said for George Perez. This is someone who seems universally loved. Obviously, he was someone who drew some of the most iconic moments in DC Comics history. He battled his illness with bravery, and I'm thankful that I got to see the work of both of those men. And the central reason why I do this is because I want to share the kind of enjoyment that I have gotten in my lifetime from men like George Perez and Neal Adams. Is I want to share that with as many people as is possible. And that's why Adam and I call ourselves ambassadors, because we believe that there is something of true worth in the comic book industry. And if you look at the amazing talent of people like Neal Adams and George Perez, then you'll understand why we are so passionate about DC Comics and comics in general?
It's funny. I only realized this the other day, but I bought a shirt recently. I think I wore it in the last episode that's currently up on the channel. That, to my knowledge, is from is art that's from a Neal Adams story, Batman story. It's a Detective Comics shirt, and so I wore that unbeknownst to me. Like it wasn't. I knew what I was wearing, but I didn't plan on wearing a Neal Adams inspired shirt, and it just so happened that I did last week. So yeah, I mean, his Batman run, Neal Adams, I'm speaking of. People credit Frank Miller for bringing back the dark, serious version of Batman, but I think there's not enough credit, and more credit should be given. More recognition for the dark and serious Batman should be given to Neal Adams, because without the work that he put in, Frank Miller wouldn't be able to come along and create the Dark Knight Returns. So
I noticed this week a lot of comic book creators, when they were asked, like, what, visually, what's their version of Batman, it was Neal Adams.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
You look at that art, that image. I'm a sucker for the yellow oval, and it was there on his Batman. Plus the blue and gray. We may never get that in the movie, so to be able to have that in the comics, that's my in terms of comic book Batman, that's the Batman that I think of when I close my eyes and daydream of Batman, which not surprisingly often happens. But
every day,
yeah, just about in between agony over the Leafs, but I digress. Neither here nor there.
Right.
And then with as you noted in your YouTube video regarding Neal, the Green Lantern work that he did was just a defining period, and so memorable, and he gave us Jon Stewart, right? And look at the resurgence that Jon Stewart is seeing now, which is great. We'll talk about that in a bit.
I remember reading an article one time where Neal Adams said that, he obviously had to push for, Jon Stewart to be included. There wasn't an African-American Green Lantern at the time. There were very few African-American characters in comics at all. And they weren't headlining characters. Rarely. I mean, you had T'Challa over at Marvel, but he said that more than once he had like young black men come up to him in tears and hug him and say thank you for putting a hero who looks like us in the comics. So for people who say comics should never try to say anything important, I disagree. And I know Neal Adams disagreed.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, fluff entertainment is cool and it's fun, but it's also cool sometimes when a comic or a movie or a TV show, what have you, has something to say. There's room for both in our
exactly
entertainment sphere, right?
Exactly.
So I am with you and Neal on those terms. In terms of George Perez, I mean, what can you say? To me, the book that really sort of, and I know it's later on in years. I think it was early 2000 or 04. I'm not 100% sure. You can correct me on the date. But when I was given, a friend of mine let me borrow, he had the 4 issues of JLA Avengers, the crossover.
Yes. Oh, yes.
That's when I was just getting back in. And he said, like, here, I got to lend you this to read. And I did. And I'm like, damn, that was awesome. Like, the art, it looks so beautiful. And I'm like, it's funny because the art was so good that, and the story was, I enjoyed the story as well, not just the art. But the art was great.
Yeah, it was 2003, by the way.
Yeah. And I said to my friend, I said, you know what? I said politely, as politely as possible, I said, screw you, because now I have to go from just buying DC characters to now adding Marvel characters to my list, and you're costing me more money. But no, that book was fantastic. I do miss the crossovers, and I know that DC and Marvel are coming together to do a reprinting of that, or has it been released yet?
They have already done it. It's sold out, and it's caused some controversy in and of itself because a lot of people who got their hands on it jacked the price up. And I usually have no problems with people flipping comics if it's your comic, it's your comic. But in this instance, it seems in bad taste to buy a book just for you to profit. Yeah. When this is supposed to go to his fans for the purpose of the money was supposed to go to him and his family, George Perez. So yeah. So exercise a little bit of judgment, people.
Yeah. But that book stood out to me as like, I know everybody will say, Crisis and all that, but for me, that book and seeing all those characters from both universes together, it was the first time I had read because I know of and I've read bits since, the Amalgam universe, but like in terms of a true crossover because that's a sort of literally, and it's called Amalgam universe, a mashing of two characters together. This was just them coming together to briefly fight, but then ultimately work together.
Well, that image of Superman holding Mjolnir and Captain America's shield.
Yeah, that's as a Superman.
Does it get any more gorgeous?
As a Superman fan, if that ain't bragging rights, and a cool looking way to have bragging rights, I don't know what it is. But so that book really stands out to me. But his art is just phenomenal across the board, so you can't really go wrong. But yeah, it's like I said. Unfortunately, this is a part of life that we all deal with. The fortunate thing is that we can always celebrate these two individuals by enjoying their work, and in our case, reviewing their work. And I think we will definitely make a point to seek out some of our favorite stories by those two gentlemen in the coming months and put down some reviews for those.
Yep.
So look out for those in the coming little while here. But in the meantime, rest well, gentlemen, and thanks for the entertainment and the memories.
Condolences to the families as well.
Indeed. All right. Let's now kind of bring the tempo up a little bit because there's a lot of really cool news where Green Lantern is concerned, both in animation and there's some movement on the live action front, Donnie.
Yes.
So let's start with the animation. We knew since Fandom 2.0 that we were getting an animated movie called Green Lantern, Beware My Power. That's all we knew. We had a title, and
that was it.
It's coming sometime. We had no idea. But we now know that the film will star Jon Stewart, the aforementioned Jon Stewart. We've got a trailer, and we've got a release date. I believe July 26th is the date.
Yes, that is the date. Yes,
which was 2 days before my birthday. So thank you, Warner Bros. for timing that accordingly.
Yeah. I just want to say, going back to what we just talked about, I hope Neal Adams knew that movie was coming out. I hope someone called him.
I hope so, yeah.
And said, yeah, by the way, there's going to be another, animated movie, and one of the characters whom you co-created will be headlining that movie.
Hopefully they can put a in memory of
that would be very fitting. Yeah. Yes.
And so we've got the trailer, and I gotta say, I love what I saw, because there's Green Lantern action, of course, but there's also Justice League components as well, because Green Arrow and Hawk Girl, I believe,
yes,
will co-star.
Martian Manhunter looks like he plays a pretty key role as well.
Yeah, and this is set, to my knowledge, in the new shared DC animated universe.
Yes, what fans are colloquially calling the Tomorrowverse.
Okay, all right, because of Man of Tomorrow, the Superman movie was the one that started it all. But you made some observations in your YouTube video about, in this universe, how Jordan is deceased. Not the comic deceased, but
right.
He's gone.
Yes. The trailer says he died fighting the Sinestro Corps.
Yeah. And I know there's a segment of Green Lantern fandom that will get upset, but
I've already seen it. Yeah.
We've had decades of Hal Jordan. Like, it's okay if the other Earth Lanterns get the spotlight for a while. And if you want your Hal Jordan fix, see Dark Crisis, because he's in that. If you've seen the preview pages. Jon Stewart is there, and this film kind of gives the impression that this is sort of his first foray with the ring, because the Justice League certainly doesn't have a clue of.
Right.
They even ask him, they're like, "Where'd you get that ring?"
Yeah, this is its own continuity, and that's why you're seeing, Jon Stewart getting his ring at the same time when we have a fully formed Sinestro Corps and a dead Hal Jordan.
Yeah, and it's cool to me. I don't need. I mean, the actual added, like, full-on adaptations are cool. Like when they for Red Sun and Dark Knight Returns and
or for that matter, Justice League War, which, by the way, kicked off the old DC animated universe, and Hal Jordan was one of the main characters. So
Long Halloween. When they do those direct adaptations, they're cool. But I also like the ones where they take bits and pieces from different storylines and create something wholly unique. That's fun, because there are elements I recognize, but this is a story that I haven't consumed.
Right.
And it's a new experience for me.
It's exciting, yes.
Yeah. Like when I'm watching The Long Halloween or Dark Knight Returns, I'm extra critical, because I'm like, all right, you took this out, how dare you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas with this, I can just be like, all right, give me what you got, and hopefully I like it, and if I don't, I'll say so. But it's a new experience. So I actually quite like that. Because I can just enjoy it without being overly critical of what they did or did not take out, or what they added in, or what's different. So, it's a different experience, but a fun experience. And I love the animation, Donnie.
Like what? Very fluid, very attractive. So, yes, I'm excited for that as well.
Sinestro looks like an absolute badass, which, I mean, do we expect anything less from
Sinestro? It's Sinestro now. Yeah, of course.
And Alyssa, who is it? Is also in it. Alyssa Drack.
Yeah. People say it differently. I say Lisa, but yeah, Alyssa Drack, who is a character. She is, the keeper of, the Sinestro Corps book, and she, oh wow, she is a very interesting character. If you've never read her backstory, how she, became.
She was around during the Black Hand stuff, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, she was
already around by then.
Yeah,
right?
she was not always a vampire. She became so through a very awesome story, by the way. So, yeah, if you ever have a chance to read her backstory, do so, and she is a character who I've loved the dynamic, because she has a lot of unrequited feelings for Sinestro.
Yeah.
And so she's always longing after him. And I really would like to see. I hope that's played up in this.
Poor girl.
One of my favorite quotes was Saronic Natu said to one of the most vicious things I've ever heard. She said, "My father doesn't know how to love. You'll always be beneath him, and not in the way you would like." That's brutal, dude.
That's great. I love it. But also, I'd like to see a movie where an animated short or something where Alyssa, Drax, and Evelyn get together
Sure.
and just commiserate that they're in love with two absolute POSs.
Yeah. Jerkosauruses.
like imagine the how it should have ended with Batman and Superman in a coffee shop.
Oh yeah.
That, but with Lisa Drax and Evelyn just lambasting those two fools. That would be fun. But yeah, I'm so excited for this, Donnie, and it looks like again Green Lantern fans are going to be in for a treat. And I have a feeling you mentioned it on your YouTube channel as well, and I think it bears mentioning, and that is you suggested that having Jon Stewart be the focus could be Warner Brothers kind of
testing the waters,
throwing out feelers, or preparing us for Jon Stewart featuring in a live action movie. Because remember, before the Suicide Squad movie was announced, the first Suicide Squad movie, Warner Brothers released the animated Suicide Squad movie first. Arkham Assault on Arkham, remember?
Mm-hmm.
And just before that, a version of Task Force X appeared on Arrow. So they seem to, before they're getting ready to launch a live action project, they prepare us. They whet our palate with an animated appetizer.
Right.
And I think that could be the case here. Because we know Jon Stewart is going to be not going to feature in the HBO Max Green Lantern show, but it's been long talked about that he would co-star in a Green Lantern live-action movie. So,
and see, I find both this movie and the prospect of eventually a Jon Stewart headlining movie more so than, and nothing against Wayne T. Carr or that scene or whatever in Justice League or whatever, but having just a Green Lantern show up well after the fact, that wasn't all that exciting to me. But Jon Stewart coming in, facing down the Sinestro Corps, and it was the Book of Parallax, by the way. That's the name of the book that I was thinking of. Lisa Drax, Sinestro, and numerous members of the Sinestro Corps finding his place in the Justice League. This is more exciting than him just kind of being tacked on at the end.
So I mean, I like I said, it's a good time to be a Jon Stewart fan and a Green Lantern fan. And speaking of live action, Donnie,
yes,
fans have been. I mean, you and I have been relatively patient, but there's a segment of fandom that just wants live action Green Lantern HBO Max news, now, and they want it every second, and they want it every minute, and every hour, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, finally, we've gotten some morsels of news, Donnie.
Mm-hmm.
Production Weekly has put out on their website and in their I guess newsletter, whatever they publish, that Green Lantern, the HBO Max series, is currently casting the remaining roles.
Mm-hmm. They
reiterated the two cast members that we knew were already cast. Finn Wittrock and I can't remember the guy playing Alan Scott. My name escapes me right now.
Mm-hmm.
But those two guys are once again confirmed, and it's stated that they're currently casting the other roles. And moreover, Donnie, in that report, it said that filming is scheduled to occur from September through December.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, we should hopefully start hearing news throughout the summer about the cast members, et cetera, et cetera.
And so maybe this time next year, we're watching that premiere on HBO.
Yeah, or late 2023 or early 2024 is when I would, because there's going to be heavy effects involved and things of that nature. So yeah. But and again, I've long said, Donnie, to you that we can't discount the fact that the pandemic probably slowed things tremendously. And so we just got to be patient. I mean, we got to understand with Green Lantern that there was an attempt in 2011. I thought it was solid for what it was, despite its flaws. But for the mass audience, it didn't click.
Mm-hmm.
So when they do it again, when they try it again, they've got to make sure it clicks.
Yeah, they've got to do everything right this time.
Unfortunately, Green Lantern doesn't have the luxury of being Batman and Superman. What I mean by that is, those guys can take a couple of failures and then bounce back and
Sure.
get retold and rethink. While I like Green Lantern to be in that place, he's not. So, or they're not, because there's more than one. So when you're trying again, you got to make sure you hit the nail on the head this time around.
Right.
So the combination of the pandemic slowing things down and them wanting to really, I think, get this right is what's taken so long. But it seems like we're finally starting to move off the runway and they're going to get going here. So that's some good news. Just to end off our news, a couple of things.
Hopefully we'll be seeing Simon Baz.
Yeah, well, Phil Bova's favorite. Can't wait till he's cast. We'll have Phil on to break it down. I'm sure he'd love to come on for that episode. But in other news, DC film related or DC live action related, there's two bits of information.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the Wonder Twins, the series film that was about that had just cast their leads?
Yes.
And was about to start production in June? Well, that's not happening anymore. The Wonder Twins has been canceled and will no longer be happening. Look, there's new ownership. They probably looked at the slate and said, do we really want to spend $70 million on, and again, no knock on fans of Wonder Twins, but because I would have watched it. If they had made it, I would have watched it and given it a chance.
I would have tried it eventually. I would have supported it, even though they're not my favorite characters.
But to spend $70 million on that set of characters?
It would have been a gamble because the Wonder Twins haven't been around that much since the Super Friends.
Yeah, and it's not like it was
there's plenty of comic appearances, but not.
And it's not like it was going to get a theatrical release. It's not going to. It wasn't as if it's going to get a theatrical release, right? It was going to be HBO Max. So the goal with an HBO Max only release is to drive up subscription and viewership. Are the Wonder Twins going to do that much, make that much of a dent? Probably not.
I think you'd have to. Well, it's like we talked about with Jon Stewart. I think it might be a good plan to put out some little nuggets to
maybe more in animation first.
Yeah, reintroduce them to the general public, and then once there's interest, then try something else.
Yeah.
So
in the episode that you weren't here for, Donnie, Travis and I talked about the cancellations of Batwoman and Legends of Tomorrow. And a lot of people were speculating, well, what does this mean? A lot of the scoopers were like, well, DC, Warner Brothers Discovery and DC are only going to focus on basically the theory going around amongst the insider scooper community is that going forward, there's going to be two DC live action universes.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be DCEU and Matt Reeves' Batverse. And going forward, if your project isn't a part of that, or can't be worked in, or reworked to be a part of that, then your project is either going to be phased out or not get off the ground entirely. So a lot of fans are worrying, well, what does this mean for Stargirl and Superman and Lois? Because those aren't part of the DCEU or Matt Reeves' Batverse. Keep in mind, none of that idea of that there's going to be two universes going forward, and only two. That's not confirmed. That's what insiders and scoopers are speculating. If that's the case, we've still got one more season of Stargirl guaranteed, and one more season of Superman and Lois that's been greenlit. Mm-hmm. So, at the very least, we're going to get one more season of each, and then we'll take it from there. If that is true, Donnie, and that's the way Warner Brothers Discovery is going, I totally get it, because look, they look over at Marvel and they're like, hey, those guys got a connected movie universe and a TV universe, like the stuff on Disney Plus. You have to watch to make sense of those movies. Mm-hmm. So, and Warner Brothers sees that and they're like, look, nobody's confused. Everybody knows what's connected. Look at the money they're making hand over fist. We want that. And so, if that's what ultimately ends up happening, I get it. I totally understand it. Mm-hmm. And something that would now, I would hate to lose Superman and Lois, but I'm not going to panic over that when I know that there's another season coming first.
Right.
Yeah. So let me see how this all shakes out.
And I'm like 95% sure that Stargirl season 3 is already wrapped.
Right. Yeah. So that's what I mean. Yeah. Regardless, we're getting a new season of that.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to panic over that. But if that is the new strategy ultimately going forward, I totally understand it. And it's evident that Green Lantern has either been, if that's true, has either been reworked or always was intended to be part of a ultimately shared universe from the get-go. So,
well, let's point out another thing too. Young Justice recently we've seen Kilowog and Tomar Ray, which, by the way, something happened with Tomar Ray. I don't want to give that spoiler out right here, but we're seeing the Green Lantern Corps as part of Young Justice now. Those little seeds often mean something, like Adam and I have talked about. Yeah. That it means that they're trying to remind people of certain parts of the DC universe. Exactly. And I think we're getting reminded of Green Lantern right now.
Exactly. And there's one more bit of news regarding live action DC. It's been confirmed by Variety that Viola Davis is in talks and will be returning as Amanda Waller in a spin-off of the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. She's getting a series that she is the star of. I don't think it's just going to be Amanda Waller sitting in her office yelling at people. If I had to guess, she's either going to be leading Checkmate or going to be leading the Sinister Six. Not Sinister Six.
No, that's yeah, sorry. That's different. Yeah,
the Secret Six.
Yes.
Yeah. And can you imagine what a crossover that would be? What a very good timeline. No, but the Secret Six. That's what I think. I don't think it's just going to be Amanda Waller like on a video screen yelling at everybody. But so I just wanted to end off there with the news, because for the segment of fandom that continues to claim that the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker were failures. Well, Donnie, correct if I'm wrong. Maybe my logic is wrong. This is why I have you on, to be the voice of reason. But correct if I'm wrong. But failures don't usually get spin-offs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I thought so. And again, that would be connected to the Suicide Squad universe, the Peacemaker universe. So, and so we have that to look forward to. Before we go to a break, real quick, Donnie, give us a little bit of a brief rundown of your first Comic-Con.
Oh, it was very nice. It was small, which is why I went to it. I'm still not attending large group activities. I went, and this was the first time this had happened. It wasn't actually far from where I live, and went with my kids. They both got things. They were very excited. I wore 3 masks, by the way, and despite being vaccinated, and if an old guy like me can do it, you can too. And it was just very nice. I didn't see a ton of comics that I wanted, but just, I put a video up on my YouTube channel because it was just nice to be back in that environment with cosplayers and vendors. Jason Keith was there, and it was just, that's my environment. That is where I'd like to be. There's very few things that compare to Comic-Con. And I did end up getting Green Lantern Volume 2, number 23, the first appearance of Tattooed Man. So,
and I knew, look, I said, if you watched last episode, I said, I guarantee Donnie's going to come back with Green Lantern paraphernalia, and I was right.
And like I said, a friend of mine gave me 2 variant covers. So,
if only I could be that right with the lottery, Donnie. I'd be right. If only predicting the lottery was as easy as predicting Donnie's going to buy something in a Comic-Con related to Green Lantern. I'd be Bruce Wayne rich, damn it.
I tell you what, there was a lot of nice figures too. So
good. I'm glad you had fun. I'm glad you were safe, and I'm sure there will be more Comic-Cons in the future. Hopefully for both of us, that'd be nice.
Right. Yeah.
But that's all we have news-wise. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back on the other side, we're going to talk about Justice League number 75. So stay tuned. We'll be back.
We'll be right back.
I'm your host, Adam.
And I'm the Emerald Enthusiast.
And for all your multiverse viewing and listening needs, check out our shows.
That includes Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Ghostbusters, Masters of the Universe, the Marvel Universe, and the DC Comics Universe, including the Emerald Echo podcast.
All right here on YouTube and Podbean. From the first podcast and vidcast to the last.
And we're back!
There we are. He just loves to do that. So that's partially the reason why we instituted this break, so he could come back and say that.
The only thing I can hope is that somebody's listening to this podcast while they're like drifting off to sleep, and, and all of a sudden, we're back.
If somebody's listening to this at 1 a.m. and they're dozing off, God help them with that hits.
It's exactly what I hope.
But there was much ado about Justice League 75, Donnie.
Yes.
It is leading into DC's big summer event, that being Dark Crisis, conveniently initialed DC. I'll just leave that there. But yeah, Justice League 75, it's been promoted as the death of the Justice League. So Donnie, let's talk about it.
Yeah, the death of the Justice League number 75. What we did know is that there would be one surviving member. And so the book opens up with a shot of Black Adam in the sky over Kahndaq, and I thought, you know what, that might be an omen, and I turned out to be right. So if you've read it at this point, you know what I'm talking about.
Spoiler, yeah, we're going to get that. If you haven't read the book, I'd suggest pausing this, reading the book, and then coming back and listening to the rest of this.
Yes.
But go ahead, Donnie. Now you can spoil whatever you're going to spoil.
Yes. So the Justice League is teleported away from various well-known places like Gotham and Themyscira. Superman's brought back from World War orbit. And Jon is a little confusingly on Oa with a fully restored battery. I actually talked about this a little bit with Dan from the Lantern Cast this week and Mosaic Comics.
Yeah.
When we left Jon Stewart, the Green Lantern Corps had the beacon, not a reformed battery. So we're not sure if this is set in the future or if maybe there was
a continuity error.
Yeah, or if there's a continuity error because there was no Green Lantern battery when we left off in Green Lantern number 12.
Right.
So again, could be just an editorial snafu, or could be something that is brought into continuity and alignment later on. So Black Canary is being teleported away, and as she is being teleported, Green Arrow grabs onto her, which brings him along too. He might regret that at this point.
I would have just stayed where I was.
So we find out that they're all being brought to the House of Heroes, where the Justice League Incarnate resides. So what was your early impressions of the first few pages?
Well, I thought they were killing them off right then and there. I'm like, oh, here it is. I'm like, they're starting with a bang. And what I thought was, okay, they're going to disappear and they're going to call this quote unquote death, but it's not really a death. Mm-hmm. That's what I thought was happening. And then they're in the House of Heroes. And I'm like, well, I guess that was wrong.
Yeah.
And then I saw Captain Carrot, and I'm like, what's going on here? Is that what his name is? I don't even know.
Yeah, Captain Carrot. Yeah.
What did I call him before I was getting it wrong? Oh, Carrot Top. There. What did I call him?
Yeah, Carrot Top was a comedian.
Carrot Top. Yeah.
Still is a comedian.
All I was missing. The only thing missing in this House of Heroes is Butterball. But that digress.
He's talking about Roundhouse, by the way.
It's never for me. His Butterball always would be. I don't care if the creator of that character has a problem with it. He can come talk to me. But until then, that's what I'm calling him.
I remember when you first said that, I was like, "Are you talking about Bouncing Boy or Roundhouse? Who are you talking about?"
I don't know. It's all the same to me. Anyway, he wasn't there. Unfortunately, I was looking for him, but not really. I could care less if he was there. But I got a kick of like seeing that massive group of like multiverse heroes is really cool.
Yeah. They gave us the impression that they were just going to kill off Justice League, core Justice League members. A lot more heroes than that died in this.
Yeah, it's like a episode of Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
minus the nudity, but yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was. I always loved and it's cool that like President Superman is like the guy that
mm-hmm.
like they all stop and they're like, all right, what's the situation? Yeah, he takes control. It really cool how they're positioning him
mm-hmm.
going forward. In
right. Calvin Ellis of Earth number 23
in the DC multiverse.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a wife on that Earth. I just can't remember which one it is. Or else
you better figure it out before you go visit.
It might have been. It's either now wait a minute. If I remember correctly, I could be 100% wrong. It's either Javicia Leslie or Megan Tandy from the now canceled Batwoman. So I'll double check that down the road and clarify. But it's one of those two, I think. Yeah. So anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Speaking of interesting tidbit this week, I was listening to a podcast. Do you know who Jeff Thorne's favorite DC character is?
Vixen?
You would no, it's Barbara Gordon.
Oh,
I would not have guessed that, but yeah, he said it's Barbara Gordon.
Awesome.
So yeah.
So he's probably looking forward to the Batgirl movie then.
Yeah. So with what he did on Green Lantern, I'd say give the guy a Batgirl miniseries. Let him write 6 issues.
I'd read it. Listen,
sure.
Whatever Jeff Thorne does in the DC universe, or more, listen, screw it. Even the Marvel universe. I know we're not in a Marvel show, but we have that here too. So I'll plug it. Where can you find our Marvel show, Donnie?
You can find that right here on YouTube. That's Multiverse Musings, the vidcast starring Adam and myself, the Emerald Enthusiast.
Yeah, and so if they give Jeff Thorne more Marvel work, I'll read that too. Look, it's going to be digital, but the Comixology, even though their new format, it still bugs the crap out of me. But yeah, I'll still read it and I'll still check it out. So yeah, whatever you put Jeff Thorne, listen, comic people, comic studios. If you want my money, put Jeff Thorne on a book. That's what I say.
That's right. If he loves Barbara Gordon, let him write Barbara Gordon.
Yeah, so, exactly. Yeah. You put creators with characters that they have a fondness for.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
But yeah, so no, I like the way they position Calvin Ellis here, and I wonder if they have big plans for him in live action at some point.
Mm-hmm. We could see.
But continue, yeah.
So we see in this that the Great Darkness is enslaving powerful villains, including Darkseid.
Yeah.
So the Great Darkness is heading to the Bleed, which might lead to, and remember, for people who don't know who the Bleed, what the Bleed is the barriers between dimensions. Yeah, we often see it like depicted as kind of like, a red, vast territory. If it were consumed or infected, it could theoretically end like the entire multiverse or omniverse, depending on what you want to call it these days. So I really do like the point here that I forget who said it. I want to say it was Dr. Multiverse, but who said the bleed isn't a good or evil force. It's just consumption. It's annihilation. Kind of reminds me.
It's like me when I see a piece of lasagna.
You know what it reminded me of? The nothing in the never-ending story.
Yeah.
When I think of the Great Darkness,
that's a good point. And also, just hearing the bleed, like the name, the bleed.
Yeah.
That could be like a faction, like a wrestling faction, like that. Imagine like the next evolution of the Brood, like in modern day, it could be the bleed. And Edge,
right.
I don't know what Edge is calling his group, but see if you can clear it with DC. Maybe get in on some of that action. Anyway,
did you see that awesome interview he did where he was like attacking people from Tennessee?
Yeah,
where he was just like, and he was doing his imitations like, Edge, why are you using all these newfangled words? By the way, we're only laughing because he's a bad guy. He's supposed to make.
He's great. He's great, and he's a Leaf fan. So
yeah, exactly. Oh, so and it's too bad. I wish Andy Kaufman was alive because with Bianca Belair being the EST of Tennessee, that feud would write itself. He could be the manager of this anti-Tennessee faction. But anyway,
yeah,
we're going off the rails again,
which always happens on this show. But
exactly. So back to what was happening. The darkness attacks just as this meeting is going on. Everyone is teleported away by Dr. Multiverse.
Right.
So, what was your impression of that?
It's just having a character, Dr. Multiverse, and what she can do is quite incredible. But also the idea that the Great Darkness has, is basically when you have somebody that's controlling Darkseid, somebody above Darkseid is never like when you're getting to that character, like there's a reason why this thing is called a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you have a character that is apparently that dangerous, there can only result in a crisis.
Yeah. Well, and we see later on.
You've got to go big. You've got to go big when the threat is more dangerous than Darkseid.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they did go big, and I think that one of the strengths of this book, and I don't think it was all good, and we'll talk about that. One of the strengths was the big splash pages. One of which was all the villains together because the Great Darkness is in control of Eclipso and Darkseid and the Spectre and Necron and Doomsday. I mean, these are some heavy hitters.
And imagine, I was just thinking as I was reading, is like all those characters who don't have control of their faculties, but are at the behest of this entity.
Right.
That's dangerous because, if they're of their own, volition, the heroes who have faced them before can kind of game plan and say, okay, this is what they're known for. This is what I've seen them do. You can sort of game plan, right?
Right.
Whereas when they're being controlled by an entity that you're not familiar with, that you really haven't had much contact with, who knows what they're going to do in a fight? Like, how do you prepare for that? Right. How do you prepare for these heavy hitters in such a state where like they're uncontrolled, like they're so unpredictable?
I'm going to say two things on that. I was a little underwhelmed by the fact that they didn't have their personalities, and we didn't get to see some of the like unique fighting type of styles that they have. Yeah. But at the same time, you look at those characters, they would not coexist as a group and try to attack as a group if they were themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
They had to have something else controlling.
Yeah, it would be a disaster. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
And the page of the two Supermen tag teaming Darkseid was pretty cool.
Yeah.
That was pretty awesome. I'm like, all right. I didn't know I needed to see two Supermen beating the crap out of Darkseid, but evidently I needed to see that because that was pretty awesome.
Well, and Darkseid had a very interesting moment too. At one point, Black Adam is able to rock Darkseid.
Yeah.
See what I did there? And he's able to break the Great Darkness's control.
He laid a smackdown on him.
That's right. But he breaks the Great Darkness's control momentarily, and you realize that Darkseid is not in any way a willing participant here.
Yeah.
He's like, if you want to be successful, and then he gets cut off because the Great Darkness reasserts its control.
Yeah.
Now, the Justice League, they realize that they're on the losing end, and Jon uses his Godstorm power to create constructs of other Justice League members like the Atom and Flash and Dr. Fate, and lo and behold, Hal Jordan. You know, for a guy who DC supposedly hates, he sure does show up in a lot of places.
It's a miracle, isn't it? How that works.
But the Great Darkness has also...
By that logic, they must hate Batman too at DC because he's everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So the Great Darkness has also enslaved the Quintessence. And Jon realizes this, and he is... Or so I thought, and I'm a little confused about exactly what happened here. I thought he was killed by the Spectre because the Spectre said, "Die, brightest night."
Yeah.
But later on in the book, it seemed like Jon was pictured with a group of heroes that were getting killed later on. So I don't know if that was an editorial snafu or I'm misreading that, but
yeah.
Okay. But look, right after,
but I know what you're saying, yeah.
Okay, all right. Anyway, we'll continue
I saw it too, yeah.
Okay, right, yeah, he was in that group of heroes.
Yeah, you're not alone, yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute, how did he reconstitute himself? And if he did, was that off panel? But anyway, so, and again, I do want to say this. It doesn't, what we saw with Green Lantern number 12, this doesn't quite line up. I don't know if like the editorial staff or whatever, like if they didn't exactly know.
I'm gonna lean into the idea that this takes place in a little bit in the future.
Yeah, I hope that's the case, or maybe they asked Jeff Thorne early on, and he gave them a little bit of what he knew he was going to write, and then they just kind of ran with it and tried to make it as close as they could.
I hope it's in the future in a little bit, but yeah,
yeah. Hope they can line it up a little bit better. Anyway. Green Arrow temporarily weakens Pariah with one of his special arrows. Was it electricity or explosive arrow? I can't remember exactly.
I think it might have been electricity.
Yeah, I had like I read a digital copy. My my physical copies are still at the comic shop. Mm-hmm. And there were how many variant covers? Because I know I got at least 2.
Good Lord, there was a bunch.
Yeah. So, Oliver then, though, after doing this, seemingly giving the Justice League, an opening, he gets killed by a Roman Reigns punch from Doomsday.
Yeah.
And that's and the reason I can't call it a Superman punch in this world is because obviously that would denote something different. So, it's a Roman Reigns punch. That's one aspect of this that it's a little thing, but it always bothers me when a human with normal durability gets attacked by someone who has like godlike powers and they survive several blows. This time he didn't. He took one big punch from Doomsday,
which makes sense. Yeah.
Which should kill a human being, and it did. Or seemingly. So now, this seems like a very important part. This is a very important part. There's no seam to it. Pariah, who's also being controlled by the Great Darkness, kills the big 3 in a way that mirrored Barry Allen's death in Crisis of Infinite Earths.
Yeah.
That were basically like they're kind of like disintegrating.
Yes.
You kind of see these panels going backwards. It was too quick for my taste, but I noticed that right away, and it made me wonder: are they really dead, or have they been transported to where Barry Allen is? Could they be taken back to like a pre-crisis world or something?
My guess is that they're in. You know how Barry Allen is off in his own pocket world?
Yeah.
Right? Like he's in Flash. Let's call it Flash World for the sake of just not having anything else to call it. And it's like it seems like this 50s utopia that is like this Leave It to Beaver kind of thing with the Flash family. I think each Justice League member is going to be in their own. Each member of the Trinity is going to be in their own pocket universe with their with their respective, the Superman family, the Batman family, the Wonder Woman family, and so then when you have to bring, and the reason why I think that is so you I think what they're doing, what the villain is doing, is kind of like lulling the hero into a sense of, this is the peace I want. This is the. It's kind of like for the man that is the black. Remember, Superman had the what is it for the man who had
the black mercy? Yeah, for the man who has everything.
Yeah, and it makes it see the idyllic. I think that's
a great story. Yeah,
but I think that's the kind of thing they're playing off of here with that, and so it's lulling the heroes into this is the place where I want to be. I don't want to acknowledge that. Hey, back in the real world, some serious crap is going on. I need to get back there. So I think that's what's actually happening, because
interesting theory.
And again, you alluding to the fact that the way they're disintegrating, it has a lot of Crisis on Infinite Earths parallels. So I think you could be onto something there.
Yeah. So that's one of the first things that I noticed was the way it was done visually really harkened back to the way Barry Allen died.
Right. Yeah.
So Pariah kills more heroes, including the Justice League Incarnate. He seemingly burns Black Adam's face, and then Black Adam yells Shazam, and then one of my favorite comic book sounds happens, and that's crack-a-cacoom. And I love seeing that. I love comic book sounds.
We're gonna have you recite comic book sounds in an episode.
Boom. Pow. Yeah. You don't hear those sounds in the real world.
Make them available for $1 each. You can put them as your ringtone, whatever you want.
There we go. That's a great idea. So, cut to the Hall of Justice, and we see Wally West, Powerhouse, Firestorm, Detective Chimp, Black Adam, and also Jonathan Kent,
Superman.
Yes. And
that guy, the guy with the S on his chest.
Right, yeah, that guy.
Just that guy. Nobody important.
Yeah, just that guy. Black Adam ends up in the meeting room, and that's how the issue ends, is him on the floor saying they're all dead, the Justice League is dead.
You know what it reminded me of?
What's that?
It reminded me of the Hulk crashing in Avengers Endgame.
Oh, yeah.
Into the Sanctum Sanctorum.
Yeah.
That's how you say it. Yeah. I always love seeing that. Anyway,
Santorum,
that's it. It reminded me of that moment. And of course, first of all, I'll be honest, I didn't expect Black Adam to be the sole survivor.
I didn't until I read the very beginning. When I saw him at the beginning, I was like, this seems like an opportunity for symmetry here. He's at the beginning and he's at the end.
And then I was like, wait a minute. The next two DC movies are Shazam family. It's Shazam and Black Adam. Gee, I wonder why they're leaving him alive.
You know what would have been funny, although completely out of character.
Batman survived. That happened to Batman and pissed off everybody. Yeah.
At the end, if they're all the Justice League members who are looking down at the Hall of Justice at Black Adam, and he says, "Finally, Black Adam."
Oh, I want to see it in the movie.
Yeah.
If he doesn't give somebody the eyebrow and give somebody the rock bottom, I'm gonna be like when Black Adam and Shazam finally fight in the movie. I want to see the rock bottom. I want to see through a table.
Yeah.
Like in the Rock of Eternity.
Or through a mountain or something like that.
In the Rock of Eternity, there's got to be a table somewhere.
Yeah.
A big stone table, and he just.
You know what I want to see is the first time they meet. Black Adam asks Shazam, "What's your name?" And when he goes to answer, goes, "It doesn't matter what your name is."
I'd pay extra for that ticket. I won't lie.
So that brings this to an end. Seemingly, everybody in the Justice League, at least that was part of this issue, with the exception of Black Adam, they are dead or off somewhere. We don't know.
Yeah. So, on the whole, as a whole, I enjoyed it. My biggest issue with this issue is the pacing. Everything happened way too fast.
You know what? I was going to say exactly the same thing.
I
think if they were going to do this, it should have been like a 3 or 4 issue miniseries.
Or just make it an 80-page giant. Like an 80-page.
Okay, or something like that. But yes, the pacing was too fast.
Because I looked at it, I'm like, this is pretty much the size of a regular issue. What are they going to do here? Yeah. And I know a lot of people are like underwhelmed by the death, the way the characters died. But I was okay with it because it was a callback to the first Crisis. So I was like, all right, I can buy that. I can live with that. But the things they did well, I mean, they certainly made the Darkness and, you know, his faction of controlled villains seem very formidable and threatening. So they did a good job there.
And I think the art was a strong point. I still think this issue is definitely worth picking up to have for your collection.
Yeah, for the art alone, for sure. Yeah. But so I'm intrigued on the whole where Dark Crisis is going to go. Ultimately, I don't think they're actually dead. I think what we posited, you know, our scenarios that we thought about is probably the likely scenario. And the reason why I'm thinking that this is set in a slight future, right, is because at least that would explain, in my mind, why the characters are currently still active in their own book when they're supposed to be dead.
Yeah,
you know,
I think a lot of people are theorizing that now that we know that this death is not going to be permanent. Obviously,
look, by the time once issue 8 is done, there's of Dark Crisis, there's going to be a new Justice League. If there isn't a new if there isn't a Justice League #1 following Dark Crisis, then I don't want to say it on the off chance it might be. Screw it, I'll say it. Look,
go ahead.
If there isn't a Justice League 1, by the end, the month after Dark Crisis comes out, the final issue of Dark Crisis, I will publicly tweet out something nice about the Montreal Canadiens.
I'm going to hold you to
that. And you know how painful that is, folks. So,
I say for 1 week you have to like change your profile picture
1
on social
week.
media.
Listen, I'll do it for a day. That's the most. I can't do that crap for a week. Listen, DC doesn't pay me enough. They don't pay me anything, as a matter of fact. So, listen, if they can get Margot Robbie to come to my house, I'll put that up for a week. No problem.
Okay.
If you make that happen, well, I'll make that. But no. So, like, So I think it's the only way keeping those characters active in their own books and doing this at the same time makes any sense is that it's set in a slightly later time period.
Could be.
Because they're doing a lot of like these miniseries and one-shots based on the Dark Crisis, what happens in Dark Crisis. So we're going to see one-shots of miniseries of Superman, Batman, Young Justice, all these people. Where my and this is my big issue with this whole setup is that could have been done in the ongoing titles for a bit.
Sure.
Like, why do we need special one-shots or miniseries when those could have taken place in the main series? Then it would have made these deaths more impactful and more believable.
And by the way, I don't have a problem at all with any of these new characters getting the spotlight for a while. I think that's the lifeblood of comics is new characters, fresh takes. Yeah. If Joe Mullane becomes the Green Lantern in the Justice League for a while, I'll buy every book.
Yeah, if John
Not
Kent
a problem.
he already is Superman, so
right.
If John Kent is in the Justice League as Superman, all right, I'll buy it.
Sure.
I'll read it. So Is there anything else you want to bring up about the book before we rate it?
No, like I said, I'm waiting to like go to the comic book shop and see my variant covers. So,
Indeed, I'm sure that'll be cool to see. Keep me informed on which ones you got. Once you remember, you're always getting variant covers, so I can understand why it's hard to keep track.
it used to be that I didn't, but then they started putting out Green Lantern variant covers, and that's my weak spot. So
Yeah, that's your kryptonite. Green Lantern. But all right then, if there's nothing else to say, let's rate this issue. So remember, 5 for story and 5 for art. What do you got?
I'm going to say 4.5 for art and 3.5 for story.
I'm in the exact same boat. 3.5 for the story and 4.5 for the art. I am ultimately, it did its job. It made me intrigued and hooked in for Dark Crisis, which we will keep an eye on and cover right here on this very show, the DC Comics Chronicles. So stay tuned for that. But until next time, well, actually, before that, if you want to keep in touch with Donnie and I and talk about this issue or anything we talked about today, you can on social media. So, Donnie, where do they track you down?
You can find me on Twitter as well as TikTok as the Emerald Enthusiast. Let's talk comics, let's talk collectibles, let's talk Green Lantern and the Justice League.
And you can find me at Adam_LeesFan on Twitter. The podcast Vidcast Network has its own Twitter page, which is at MMNPDC. There's also a Facebook group, which is in the description below. Click that, I'll add you, and we can continue the conversation there. But despite the events of issue 75, the Justice League is forever. From the first time each one of them disperses and disappears to the last. So long, everybody.
So long, everyone.